This episode was filmed on Wurundjeri country and Jara country. Lars was a student of architecture when he started his tiny house on wheels. He figured that he needed some building experience, in order to flesh out his career experience. He didn't want to be a designer just on paper. He wanted to be somebody who understood the actual building process. So he did a real leap of faith into the deep end and learnt to swim. He engaged with the Surf Coast Shire in their trial of allowing tiny houses on private property for some of the time that he lived in his tiny house on wheels with his partner in the Surf Coast Shire of Victoria. And he talks about moving the tiny house. He talks about moving the tiny house himself with rented vehicles, which is not something that I've ever come across anyone doing. Usually it's a hired service or you use your own vehicle. You certainly don't necessarily move a tiny house at 4.5 tonne with a rented vehicle. But this is something that he's managed to do. So he's very innovative, extremely competent, great mindset of just, I'm going to learn as I go. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I do want to really know what could go wrong in order to figure it out. So hats off to Lars. Incredible tiny house journey, really impressive outcome, and I hope you get a lot out of the episode. Oh, and apologies for how I look in that video. I had to use some strange equipment and I couldn't quite get the angle right, so sorry. Candid Tiny House is a podcast and a video where I get to go back to our past clients, people who've bought a trailer from us and taken a course on how to build a tiny house on wheels in Australia. And they've gone ahead and built their tiny house. And then we get to have an honest, deep, reflective conversation about what it's really like to build a tiny house so that you can learn from their reflections, their mistakes, their wisdom, all of their rich and varied experiences from building a tiny house on wheels in Australia. So grab your notebook and a cup of tea because we're sharing real stories of what it's like to build a tiny house in Australia. Thanks so much, Lars, for coming on this Candid Tiny House show. I just so appreciate you sharing your time and your experience with us.
No worries, lovely. Great to be here.
Do you want to start off by telling us a little bit about how you decided to get into tiny house building? Like, why a tiny house on wheels?
Yeah. So I'll give sort of the full rundown. So I actually am an architecture student. So I started my bachelor's back in 2019. So doing a Bachelor of Architecture. As sort of part of that, you obviously do like a very theoretical background into building and construction, but there wasn't really a very hands-on approach to it at all. And to be completely honest, during COVID, I got quite bored. I was like, oh, well, I should build something. It was essentially deciding out of a van conversion or a tiny home. I was like, oh, do I go for it? Do I not? And essentially I was probably that close to actually doing a van conversion. Long story short, I didn't and was like, oh, I'll buy, like, essentially go get a trailer, build myself like a very, very small tiny home. Like actually way smaller than the one that I'm currently sitting in. Probably actually sort of closer to like a 5 meter length. Ended up sort of, as I was designing it, whatnot, I was like, oh, what's my intentions with this tiny home? And sort of as I was researching, I kind of just expanded. Because I was like, oh, well, if I'm already going to delve into it, I may as well delve into it a bit further. So yeah, ended up, just doing it that way. It was kind of more, I wouldn't say it was a spontaneous thing, but it was more of I wanted to do something different than everyone else. That was, I wasn't really fond of renting forever. This was my idea of, essentially getting out of, I guess, the rat race, for the lack of a better word. But yeah.
Yeah, good one. So you're killing quite a few birds with one stone there, right? You're ending boredom.
Yeah.
You're getting practical experience.
I think the boredom was the big one. Yeah, I can't really sit still for very long periods of time. And so COVID, obviously, you're inside the whole time. And I was like, oh, well, I may as well do something. Had all the time in the world. I mean, I was still studying full time, working part time. But yeah, you can't really see all your friends and whatnot. So this was kind of I was never really a hands-on person at all. Like prior to, this is actually one thing I love telling people, prior to making a tiny home, the only thing I'd ever built was a letterbox. Um, and so, actually, sorry, that's a lie. There was a letterbox, and then I cut out a wall and put a window in it in our shed at one point to turn that into a studio. So that was quite literally just cutting out a hole in the wall, putting a window in, painting the walls. Um, so cut, probably with most like everyone else that does a tiny home, it was a very, very big jump, going from, building a letterbox to a tiny home. And so, yeah, I don't know. It was kind of, yeah, I think it was just a piece of boredom that I just needed to tackle. That was kind of my main thing.
Did it work?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It kept me busy for a while. I actually went into it with very, how do I describe it? Very poor planning as to how long like I had no idea how long it would take me. Um, I didn't even have a timeline set in my mind. I was kind of like, oh, I hope I get it done in a year. Sort of, I, I was quite flexible, with it. And so, yeah, it kind of, I don't know, I just did bits and bobs and etc. It cured my cook boredom, but I mean, during COVID, we ran into quite a lot of delays with essentially, for example, the windows. We ordered them. It took an extra 9 months longer than expected to get them. Yeah, so that blew out the timeline from, or was originally sort of a year, out to I think it was like 16 months or something like that. I literally at one point had the tiny home fully built. It well, essentially it was up to, well, the lock up stage just prior. Put the windows in. And it just sat in a friend's shed for 9 months because I couldn't do anything with it. Um, so yeah, it was definitely had a few like spanners that were thrown during the actual construction phase, but I guess it's all part of it. But yeah,
Wow, that is the longest wait that I've ever heard of for windows.
yeah, it was because I think it was meant to arrive in October or something like that, and it ended up arriving in June or something like that.
Like
Yeah,
frustrating.
yeah, it was. I was kind of truthfully actually quite thankful because quite a number of the window companies that I was looking into went bankrupt or sort of went under during a time, and obviously then you wouldn't have your windows at all. So in some sense, I was thankful that they actually even arrived. Also thankful in the fact that I wasn't really pressured into it. So I know there's quite a lot of other people that would be in very different situations than me. Um, at the time, I was still, living home, like at home with parents and etc. So there was obviously a bit of urgency from my end to move out, but in terms of like financially, it wasn't. I didn't have someone breathing down my neck about like a rent or landlord and etc. So I'm very, yeah, very like lucky in that regard. Um, but yeah, so I guess it would have been a very different picture if it was someone that actually did have a big time crunch. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, you were really lucky to have approached it within that super relaxed sort of setting of living at your parents' place, not having any particular
yeah,
deadlines. And yeah, indeed that you got your windows at all.
yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, yeah, because I think I'm probably a bit younger than most people that would have taken up. Like, I think I remember when I was taking it up from Fred, actually. I remember this so vividly. I rocked up with my red P plates. And Fred looked at this and was like, is this legal in red P? Like, you're the first person I think we've ever had on P plates. And I was like, oh, well, I was actually right in the midst of COVID when, um, yeah, when they had all like the travel restrictions and etc. And they lifted the ban for a couple of days to, that you could actually, travel again. I beelined it straight to Fred, picked up the trailer, went back home. Um, yeah, no, that was definitely an experience. Yeah, driving with
How
that.
old were you?
I think I would have been 19, I think, at the time. Something,
Fantastic.
oh, maybe 20. Maybe I think maybe just 20 or yeah, somewhere in that
Yeah.
region. Um, but yeah, no, it was definitely like like actually driving the trailer itself wasn't very unfamiliar to me because for work we tow trailers all the time, and truthfully, it kind of sounds a lot of like a bit weird to most people. Like when they first buy a tiny home, they go, "Oh well, that must be a nightmare to tow." And I kind of go, it's actually kind of easier to tow because you can see the whole thing. It's not, if it's a really small trailer with a really small, axle, or no, drawbar, sorry. Um, you try and reverse and the thing just goes the other direction. So in that regard, it's actually, yeah, it wasn't as daunting as it sort of probably should have been, I would say. But
How
yeah.
long is the trailer that you ended up buying?
So this one was the 7.2 meter one. Um,
Mm.
I probably, when I was designing it, I was considering going for the 8 meter one, or I can't remember the size that's above that. Is there like a 9 meter or something? Or
Yeah, there's a bunch. I mean, there's 7.2.
yeah,
The bigger one from that is 7.8, and then lots of people go for the 8 meter.
yeah, yeah, because I was thinking of sort of that one. The main concern for me was weight, because as you'll probably see from the pictures that we'll show later, I really, really like timber clad buildings. So the entire exterior, except one wall, was timber clad. I'm not sure what's like why. I think I just quite really like the sort of Scandinavian minimalist sort of nothing, yeah, aesthetic. And so I really wanted timber clad, and I knew that would sort of beef up the weight quite a bit. Um, which in the end we actually did sort of go. We're close to the 4.5 tons, like very, very close. We're just under. Um, yeah, I would definitely warn people to be very cautious of the weight. That's probably the one area that I would say I screwed up on a little. Like actually, when I was building the whole thing, originally I had a big, it was kind of like a storage box at the front of the tiny home, like for all the solar, all the gas, etc., to keep it all sort of a bit more pretty. Sort of just I don't really like looking at the gas hot water system and all that stuff. Um, and I ended up building it, and then my girlfriend and I at the time were like, "Oh, we'll go take it for a drive, to the weigh station and see what we're sitting at, just so we can sort of gauge." Um, Very thankful I did that. That was bit of a mission to get it to a weigh station, but yeah, in doing so, we realized I was already, I think at the time I was at 3.3 tons, and I hadn't even clad the building yet. I hadn't clad anything. The interior was up, um, but I still need to do exterior cladding and windows, I think. Um, so from there, we actually pulled that all off. I cut back on the design a little bit in some aspects, so there was meant to be sort of a bit more going on behind me. Just purely from a weight perspective, I tried to keep everything that I could sort of very, it's correct word, sort of very portable, I guess. So anything, if I ever wanted to move, I could take things out, move it, and then put them back in. Sure, it did mean that you need to do, multiple trips or something like that, but in the grand scheme of things, like you don't really move a tiny home very often. If it requires one extra trip, so be it. Um, so if I were to move it with the fridge, with the couch, with, even my skylight can be physically popped off. So if I can take all those things off, then I'm under the weight, which is what I have to do every time. Sure, it's annoying, but it works. So you kind of have to, find some loopholes around it. And I guess actually on that skylight note, that was kind of an unintentional thing as well, in the aspect that I was also over the height limit, because I swapped from a fixed skylight to an opening skylight, which those ones are sort of like an extra 50 mil higher. And in doing so, I was over the height. So if I'm driving, I can put the fixed skylight on and drive with it. Or if I just want to skip that altogether, I just essentially pop the skylight off, put it into the bed, drive. When you get to the location, pop it back on, and you're good.
Wow.
So it is, yeah, it's definitely not like a caravan. It's not one that you can sort of just pick up and drive off, sort of thing.
Yeah, sure.
I'm sure anyone that goes into a tiny home can look at a tiny home and appreciate that.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think what you're talking about is just that what I would call a contingency plan for your weight.
Yeah.
That you've got removable items and you do need to remove them. Like you're in a situation now where you are needing to
Yeah.
use your contingency plan. So
Exactly.
it's it's not ideal, but it's at least it's there.
Exactly. So like there's definitely a lot of hurdles such as that I countered during the tiny home build, that I was like, oh, how did it, like, nothing in the tiny home is going to be perfect, especially when it's your first build. That it's kind of part of the process. I think the learning I mean, I really love learning. I think that's something I've sort of found over the time. I'm not sure if that's because it tackles my boredom, but yeah, learning is something that I love doing. Um, and yeah, there's going to be a lot of times during the build of the tiny home where I felt so out of my depth. I was like, I shouldn't have done this. I was like, what am I doing? I was like, I'm stupid. I'm a 19, 20-year-old throwing more money. Like I think my biggest purchase to date, or even to this day still, is the trailer. My second biggest purchase is windows. My third biggest purchase was a Bunnings trip for all the plywood. And that's still to this day. Actually, not that couch was pretty expensive, but um, but yeah. So you learn like there's a lot of sort of like unexpected curveballs that were thrown at you, um, and everything was more expensive than I thought it would be. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, let's talk about budget. Like, what did you think you were going to be spending, and how did you pay for it all? Did you have savings, or did you just work to pay the next bill, or how did you do it?
So it was kind of a bit of both. Originally I had everything saved up. Where I think sort of because originally the like when I was starting off, the idea was for it to be the 5 meter tiny home or 6 meter. Obviously, as it expands, it gets more and more expensive, and you go, oh, well, if I'm already spending X amount, why not spend X amount more? Like it's only a couple percent more, and that sort of snowballs. So I think the snowball was the thing that got me originally. Like originally, I think all in all, actually, to be completely honest, I sort of lost track after a little bit of the money. I kind of was like, I don't want to see it. Um, but yeah, so originally it was quite a budget build, and then as it went on, um, I think yeah, the luxuries got the better of me, and I was like, oh, maybe having a skylight above the bed would be really nice. Maybe having this above the there would be really nice. This shower type, oh, I'll do that. Like um, I don't regret a single thing that I've done. Like it's amazing. Um, but yeah, so after a while, I was definitely down to. Actually, I remember one week I was down to double digits in my bank account. Um, and I was looking, I was like, I've got to work a bit extra next week to pay for the plywood for next week or whatever it was. But that was quite close towards the end of it, which was quite satisfying. Like once you're at the end and you see sort of everything sort of taking shape, then you're like, okay, just the final push. Um, but yeah, so I did actually because I was studying full time, working part time, and then building this part time on the side. Um, so I did have to sort of cut back on uni quite a bit, pick up a bit more work, just for one semester. And then yeah, just ended up pretty much funding it that way. I think there's probably about 10 grand or something that I did have to loan from friends and family. Um, but yeah, in the grand scheme of things, most of it was cash.
Okay, cool. So can you
Yeah.
ballpark it for me on like what you reckon it might be
I
if you let
actually
yourself think about it for a minute?
I get scared about it. I think
Yeah.
so. Original budget was actually 50 to 60. I think towards the end it probably would have been closer to the 100. Um, I think
Oh
the
wow, that's a fair
yeah
bit over, isn't it?
yeah it was a fair bit over. I sort of once I decided to go from the 5 meter one to the 7.2, I immediately knew it's probably going to be closer to the 75, 80. Um, and then with COVID expenses, extra add-ons, etc., that's when I think it sort of blew up to the 100. Um, Obviously that doesn't account for any labor at all. Um, like I did quite literally everything apart from the two things that you can't do, which is plumbing and electrical. Um, but yeah, so it was definitely a bit higher than I was sort of hoping it would be. Um, but yeah, definitely don't regret it. But that being said, that those figures could be off by 20% either way. Because I never actually crunched the numbers in the end. I was too
Because
scared to
you're
look.
taking
So
this approach. You're taking like,
yeah,
no,
I was just like,
no.
Here's my credit card. Just tap it. Just um, but yeah. So it probably would have been closer to I think the 85, 90 if I had to take a guess. Could very well have been 110. I have no idea.
Okay. It's a
Um,
ballpark. It's a range.
yeah, so it's a very big range. I think one day when I'm wise and old, I'll go okay because I have all the receipts sitting there. They're all organized appropriately. I just didn't want to look at it. I was just like, no, I'd rather not do that. I'd rather actually build the theme. which if I do ever build like another tiny home, then probably worth double checking all of that. But that being said, though, if I did another tiny home, I would probably do it completely different, I would say.
Ooh,
Completely.
really?
Yeah.
What would you do differently? Because it looks beautiful. Like it looks
Oh,
that's a
yeah.
success to me.
I
So
do love
what
it.
would you do
Yeah.
differently?
Well, I guess it really comes down to the purpose of what the tiny home's going to be built for. So originally, I built this tiny home to sort of live in. That was the whole point of it. So I lived in it for 18 months down in Torquay. Now it's sort of running as an Airbnb. And so originally it was all designed, as sort of for me to live in. I knew how everything operated and et cetera, et cetera. Now as an Airbnb, for example, like even those 4 switches there, no one has a clue what the 4 different switches mean and all that stuff. So I find a lot of people in the Airbnb go like start flicking things and breaking like anything that can be broken will be broken in an Airbnb, which is the unfortunate thing. So if I were to do another one there, I would probably keep it single story. I would rather, so this one's, what is it? It's right at the limit of like 4.3 meters high. So I would probably keep it single story, but extend it longer instead. So probably still do, like bath, I'll probably do like bedroom on one side, bathroom in the middle, lounge on the lounge kitchen on the other. But yeah, a lot more sort of a focus as well on the outside rather than the inside. So a lot more like I've got one sliding door here, for example. Originally, I did want like the big bifold doors, but I sort of ended up that wasn't really part of the budget at that point. I was like, oh, that's probably the one thing that goes pretty quick. But if I were to do another one, I would sort of try and make it in a way that you can open everything up and it feels like you're living outside but inside. I'd say, even though this one does obviously have quite a lot of windows, that was sort of the intention, but somehow design it so it's even more. So I guess. But yeah, I definitely, I mean, even as a young adult, but even just going up these stairs, up and down, up and down, up and down, they just seem to be a bit of a troublesome area, unfortunately. So and I guess also more so from the towing perspective as well. It's a lot easier to, I mean, I would argue it's a lot easier to tow something that's like lower in height but longer than it is, taller and shorter. So like this one, when you go around corners, I do get a bit scared, like towing it. So I went and got a truck license as well, because I didn't want to pay for a towing company to tow it around all the time. And so I definitely do get very, very scared whenever I tow it, which I can see why. I see why people get towing companies to do it, but once again, that was just me trying to cut costs because I knew I sort of would have to move it quite a few times during the build. So that was sort of, that reason.
Yeah.
But
what are you towing it with?
So I've got a heavy rigid license. So you can go to off. It's actually, once again, for any young listeners that there are out there, it is incredibly hard to find something to hire as anyone that's A, less than 21 and B, less than 25. Because obviously at the time I was 20 or something. So I would try and find one of those little 4.5 ton tipper trucks, the ones that you sort of see like the gardening stores have. I think there was a website called Diggermate, I believe it was.
Okay.
And so that's where I ended up sort of hiring one of their trucks. It's like a little franchise of, from my understanding, I think it's like a bunch of builders that sort of, you can sort of rent some of their equipment for a day. They obviously probably just don't care about their insurances and you can just, I don't know. I'm not sure how it worked. I asked him, I was like, can I, I'm not 21. And he's like, yeah, no, that's fine. I was like, okay. So yeah, essentially I just get one of those. You can get them from like Kennard's Hires and all that stuff, but they don't let you if you're less than 21, I think it was. Or I think 25. So that was that was probably one of the bigger things that I did not anticipate at all. I just thought, oh yeah, I can just hire a truck and obviously, if you don't have the age restriction, it is 100 times easier. But that being said, they're also probably not the best things to tow a tiny home with. If they, I mean, sure, they legally can tow 4.5 tons, but you know, practically speaking, they weren't. I remember at one point I was towing it from Geelong to Melbourne. There's a sort of a big hill on the backside of Geelong, and essentially the entire trip I've got the pedal to the metal. It's the gases, and then going up that hill. I think at one point we were going 40 k's an hour in 100 zone, because the truck just didn't have the juice to get up there. Yeah, so it was a bit on the scary side. That's you live and you learn. I guess I wouldn't probably do that again.
Sure, yeah, you want like an overpowered truck, which is why you get the larger license. Because officially you can tow 4.5 ton on a standard license, but
Correct, yeah.
you wanted the bigger truck. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, you can drive those trucks on a car license, but it restricts it to 3.5 tons.
Okay.
For those specific ones. So that's why I was like, oh, and there was no way around it, like, or other than knowing someone that has a big American truck. That would be your best bet. That is something that I would try and do now.
How many times have you towed it?
Towed it from obviously your place. Not really. That was just a trailer then at that point.
Yeah.
Down Melbourne to Geelong, back to Melbourne again, back to Geelong. Essentially, because I got kicked out of. We had a spot that I was renting in Geelong. And they were there's a bit of a miscommunication. When we moved it there, it was in sort of like a caravan storage yard. And we sort of were like, oh, can we put it here and then sort of work on it? They're like, oh, that's completely fine. But they hadn't consulted with their business partner about us working, and they didn't have the legal rights. So we got kicked out of that within 24 hours. So yeah, it was that was a bit of a headache. I literally moved it there, I think, like the very next day, or like the very next week. The first day I was working on it, someone drove by and they're like, oh, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, just working on my thing. And like, you can't do that. I was like, but I was told that I could. They're like, no, you can't. You have to head off. I think they gave us 7 days to like get out of it. And I was like, holy cow. So I had to go through that whole process again of rehiring the truck, etc., etc. Took it back to Melbourne. Then eventually, I think like a month later, found a spot in Torquay, so took it back to Geelong again.
Yeah.
And then lived in it in Torquay for probably a year, and that's it. I can't. Yes, somewhere between a year and 2 years. And then sort of eventually, life changed. Moved back to Melbourne, and moved it one more time to Melbourne.
So it's moved a lot. You've actually got a fair bit of experience with it.
Yeah, I would probably say 5 or 6 times, I would say. When it was fully built, only twice. But sort of during the construction phase, I didn't really have a solidified spot for it yet at that point. Because I sort of, I went into it with, very minimal planning in that regard. I was like, oh, well, I'll find someone. I was very naive with a lot of things. I was like, oh, I'll find someone. Even optimistic is probably the way that I like to put it. So yeah, it all works out in the end. So just go for it.
Yeah, that's good. Hey, tell me, it sounds like you've used the Surf Coast Shire trial for tiny houses on private property. Can you tell us about that whole process and experience?
Yeah. So I actually had it up in, I don't know if you know the exact suburb, essentially sort of the back suburbs of Torquay. Okay. This is back when they were sort of talking about starting this whole, I'm not entirely sure what they actually called it, like tiny homes like scheme essentially. Sort of just by pure luck, my girlfriend at the time happened to live in Torquay. So like, oh, we'll just move it to Torquay. I'll go live there, go be a beach bum for a bit. However, it was still very, very early in their like initial stages. They didn't really know what was going on themselves. I like before I moved there, I was asking them like, oh, so what do you know about this thing? And they're like, we know nothing. I was like, oh well, thanks guys. Like they're like, oh, there's something coming, but we have no information. And I was like, Thanks. That's really, really helpful. Um, so I kind of went into there blind. We moved it, filled out all the applications for it, and etc. Our tiny home met all the requirements and etc. Um, but then it was always like weird. I can't even remember what it was. I think it was a conjunction of different fees that you had to pay, plus inspections or something, and a whole load of different hurdles. And actually, I sat on the phone with one of the council members at one point, and I was like, "Guys, you're making this so complicated. Just like, should do it in a really simple. Like it was. It was better than anywhere else. So at least there was a pathway forward. But you had to tick all these different boxes, and it was really stringent. And then they were like, "Oh, if you don't meet, like, because we had already moved there at that point, um, and so you have to do some sort of like, for example, investigation of like, did any vegetation have to be, disturbed in the process of moving there? Did you have to chop any trees to get your house in their backyard, for example? And like, we have to trim a hedge. So, but they're like, well, that's impacting. I'm like, God, these guys, like, you want us to be honest? And so there was a lot of, yeah, I guess a lot of unnecessary stuff that they were sort of asking for. And in the end, we were kind of like, well, no one's thrown a fit. And this is what sort of another council said. They're like, look, if no one complains, we don't care. To be completely honest, like that was, I'd called up several councils, and that was sort of the gist that I got from them. They were look, we kind of operate on a complaint basis. That's sort of how we roll. Like if you're under the radar, look, sure, you might not be following the rules. We'll give you a little kick up the bum. Say like, if something happens, we'll be like, oh, hi, we've noticed X, Y, Z. Please move. Like that was there was no repercussions, none of this. At the time, all of the neighbors actually loved our tiny homes. Like we had, one of the neighbors in particular, they had like two little kids, and they were like so like confused by the whole thing. They like would come over every day or every other day. You just wake up and you just see the little kids like running, and you're like, oh, well, g'day there. So yeah, like no one really seems to care. And we're like, well, is it worth even going through the process? And so we never actually, like, we filled out all the forms and etc. and never submitted them. Because we were then like, oh, well, then we're going to get investigated for X, Y, Z, and then might have to move. And in the grand scheme of things, as good as like the idea was from, like, Surf Coast Shire, it was so, yeah, I think it was just so fresh. Like when we started, it might be very different now. But it was, yeah, very fresh at the time that I just sort of was like, it's really worth it, which is kind of sad. But yeah, we never got a complaint from anyone there. In fact, we actually got the opposite. We asked if some people would be willing to bring more tiny homes there, because obviously it's a form of sort of passive income for them. They've already got the land. You've got a tiny home. It works for everyone.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I didn't really follow the formal route, unfortunately. In talking,
Yeah,
at least.
yeah. You had a foray with the bureaucratic process, and it sounds like it was just too cumbersome. And it sounds fresh. Like you're right. Like I think it was only a 2-year trial. So, and you were probably the first people who even asked for the forms.
Yeah.
It sounds like
I
you
don't
were
even.
probably a bit ahead of your time. I guess going back a bit, what did you do to prepare? Like, how did it go, that clunky change from having studied architecture and then jumping on the tools? Like, did you do anything else to prepare yourself, or did you just buy tools and hope for the best? Like,
So I think one thing that came in like really, really handy for me, which it kind of, I say this to people and it blows their sock, like they blow their brains out. Like, this entire tiny home was built with YouTube. Like the amount of things that you can find on YouTube nowadays is remarkable. Especially nowadays, like with AI and stuff like that, you can just ask it a question and it gives you everything, like single thing if, tells you where to find information. A bit less so back in 2020 when we didn't have, ChatGPT and all that. But yeah, so I remember it so clearly. Like there would be days when I would rock up and like, for example, when I was doing the roofing, I was like, I have no idea how to do flashing. And so I went and sat on the roof. I was in like a a warehouse at the time. They're doing like construction below. And I was sitting there on the roof. Actually, no, yeah, one of the guys walked by and he's like, "So you're doing the roofing today?" And he said, "Yeah." And I was like, he's like, "Oh, do you know how to do it?" And I was like, "Watching a YouTube video right now." And then that was, you just go and do the roof. And then the next day, you're like, "Oh, how do I do flashing?" You'd sit there and you're like, "Okay, fold it like this," and you just learn. So I also, yeah, like it did definitely help sort of having the architecture background. So things like flashing, for example, the average, Joe Blow wouldn't really know what flashing is, and etc. So I would definitely say the architecture stuff does help, but architecture isn't really very practical at all. It's very computer based. Like, so from like sort of a framing point of view, you get a bit more of an understanding of, so, a bit more of a general understanding of like, how loads work and etc. So structurally, I had a bit more of an advantage in that realm. But hands-on, absolutely nothing. It was quite literally just YouTube. But that being said, though, I'm going to give you a little shout here. They did do the Fred's Tiny Home course online thing. I did that. I think I did that just prior to picking up the trailer, just the online version, and that was tremendously helpful. Regardless of if someone, yeah, I'm not trying to preach you guys here, but regardless of if someone buys a tiny home trailer from someone else or from you guys, that course in itself was worth every penny. Like I would pay 4 times the amount for that. But thank goodness you don't charge that much for it. But no, that was definitely worth its weight in gold. That course. So that one saved me a lot of headaches. Yeah, probably that and YouTube combined, and that's honestly sort of all you really need. Sure, it might be helpful every now and then to have a friend that is in the field, like a carpenter or electrician or a plumber. But I mean, it is easy to do it without, or not easy, but it is possible to do it without it. So,
Yeah, that's good to know. Yeah, that's quite encouraging, isn't it? To think that, in this technological day and age, you really can access good quality information. And
yeah,
I guess it's hard for you to assess like how much your architecture background and, all that training, like that's a 4-year course
yes,
in creative building theory,
yeah,
so that's a lot,
yeah,
so it'd be hard for you to imagine what it would be like without that. But then again, you know, yeah, I just think that it is really good that you can get all that education online, whether it be through the Tiny House University or through YouTube. And I guess the YouTube is really good for the hands-on manual visuals of like, this is how you manipulate this, and this is the tool that you need for that exact thing. Yeah, that's
yeah. Well, I guess architecture. So it's a 3-year course. When I started the tiny home, I was only a year into it, so a year and a half.
Okay.
So it wasn't like I was, I hadn't finished my course or anything. And architecture is also, I don't know, it's a very design sort of oriented course. It's nowhere near as sort of, I guess people go, "Oh, architects, you must know how to build a wall. You must know how to frame a wall. You must know how to." You don't get taught any of that. It's like I remember the first class of architecture I walked in, they're like, "All right, let's draw a croissant." And I was like, "What?" Like, I was like, uh, what's the croissant got to do with? And then, yeah, there was like some, like it's definitely nowhere near as construction oriented as one would imagine. Towards the masters, yes, it does get a bit more. You do get a bit more knowledge about that, but bachelor's, I'll be completely honest. But I've probably watched like 8 hours of YouTube, and it would have been more helpful than the entire architecture degree.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Look,
So
you've opened my eyes. I know that, like, architects do get criticized a lot for making something pretty but not necessarily buildable. But
yeah.
the idea of you drawing a croissant, not an interior of like a build out of a wall. That's funny.
I feel like I'm shitting on my own job here, but yeah, it's when you start off, they're trying to teach you more so the skills to become an architect, not the architectural skills. That's sort of a weird way to phrase it, but they're trying to, like, for like they're drawing a croissant. The idea was you cut it in like sort of sections, and then you understand how like sectional views of like architectural diagrams work.
Oh,
And it's also
yes.
getting like your drawing skills up because, architecture drawing, I mean, not that you really need it nowadays at all for an architect. Yeah, I definitely would not really emphasize that an architecture degree is needed in any way, shape, or form to build a tiny
For
home.
this, no.
No, definitely you can definitely do it without an architecture degree. Sure, it's helpful, but yeah, no, I wouldn't be discouraged. Like I wouldn't discourage anyone that doesn't have a construction bone in their body. Like it's yeah, as long as I guess you're willing to learn, and throw yourself in the deep end. I think that's the main one. And being comfortable with being uncomfortable is probably the best one, I would say. There's a lot of times you have no idea what's going on, which is both a blessing and a curse, but I don't know, you work around it, I guess.
No, it sounds like you really threw yourself at it and you were totally willing to be in an unknown. So yeah, it does sound like your desire to learn, it was actually probably the thing that made up for
Yeah.
any lack of knowledge, like because you were willing to seek it out and you were willing to persist and willing to be unsure.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's definitely mistakes that I've made in this build that I wish I knew before. But it's until you do it, you can't really know.
Well, give me one or two of those things so that anybody listening can go, okay, well, those things I can be warned about.
So my tiny home is a timber framed tiny home. I was very cautious of the structural side of things. Like I think I sort of went into it thinking, it can't really hurt to over engineer everything. So my spacings for studs were probably a bit shorter than they needed to be in some areas. Even like the loft, for example, was I essentially followed construction, like home construction sort of guidelines, which means you need much thicker timber than required, and etc. etc. Yeah, so all in all, it kind of had a bit of a snowball effect, and so since I've added like ply cladding around the entire, so I've got timber stud walls, the 12 mil ply sheathing around the entire building.
Wow.
Then I've got sort of like some little spacing timbers to sort of have like an air vent behind that. Then I've got 12 mil ply, not ply, sorry, is it Victorian ash, I think it is, on top of that as well. And then internally, I've also got 12 mil Felcatta ply. So,
oh my God, Lars, no wonder you're overweight.
yeah. So
Like a duck, you could have gone 4 mil ply for the sheathing.
yeah. So I definitely went overboard. But I mean, what's that? 12 on the inside, 70 for the walls, 12, 10 spacing, and another 12, I think. So
yeah, you made some very heavy walls there, dude. Hey, did you do like a weight calculation, like even theoretically before you built?
I did, yeah. I did not account for water weight though. So obviously when it rains, that'll add a bit of weight to your timber and etc. So when I was building the whole thing, that's when I realized, oh shit, like I'm going way, way over. So that's the entire back wall is sort of a black, I don't even know what kind of, it's just like a sort of a black metal looking thing. So kind of like a color bond, but like a super thin one. Okay. That was safe weight because I was like, oh, well, no one's ever going to see the back of the tiny home. I don't really care about the back. In hindsight, I definitely went overboard. So that's one thing I would definitely cut on next time, both from a, cost point of view, because, if you've got ply on both sides of the wall plus silver top ash, on the outside. So that was, all the materials combined is both weight and price. That's probably the one area I would change the most, from a construction point of view. In terms of other mistakes, I would never do a downdraft range hood ever again.
Okay.
that was like a bit of an issue that I encountered. Because I obviously have this really, really nice big window in front of my kitchen here, and sort of just on that side of the camera. I've got the stove and range hood, and because the window's there, I couldn't really put a range hood there without it sort of being in front of the window. So if you were to look from outside, you'd see like the internal operation stuff of the like range hood. I was like, how do I get around this? I was like, oh, I'll do a downdraft one. So that's like the ones that sort of pop up from the bench. Um, but obviously with it having far more moving parts, it breaks like there's no tomorrow. So I think I'm up to like the third replacement now or something at this point. And with it being an Airbnb, most people have never really used a downdraft aircon. So it was fine. Oh, not aircon, sorry, range hood. It was fine when I was using it, and then as soon as I put it up as an Airbnb, people, sort of just mistreated it, would sort of start breaking it, like slapping it, figuring out like, how do I get this thing to go up? Even though there's buttons on the side, no matter how clear I made the instructions, people just don't care, break it. So that's one mistake I would never do again. Even if I build a normal house, never do a downdraft. That's I think it looks really nice. I'll give it that. Like it looks super pretty. But functionally, it's horrible. So
Yeah.
that's more of a very cosmetic thing than a actual tiny home. Probably the problem, I would say, though.
Back to the weight. Are you using double glazed windows and doors there?
No, I thought about it, but then from a cost point of view as well, that was actually one of the weight considerations. Because I was like, oh, I know, essentially double glaze is double the weight. And so in the quote that I got, it actually shows you the exact weight of every window from the manufacturer.
Oh, fantastic! That's
it was really helpful. Yeah. Really didn't like the manufacturer in every other regard, but that was the one thing that I liked. So what was it? Yeah, so it had like the exact breakdown. This is when I was getting the quotes. I was sort of comparing between multiples. And I was like, oh, well, added, I think it was like, I think it was like 400 kilos for windows or something. Like, I could be terribly wrong there or something. But it was a lot of weight just on windows. I think I'm terribly wrong there. Yeah. I was like, oh, if I double that, then I already knew I was close on weight. And I was like, no, that's probably not one thing I'm not willing to sacrifice on. But that being said, I think in a tiny home, it's very different than most homes in Melbourne, in the sense that in Melbourne, most people, ironically, despite being Australia, 9 months of the year, you actually care more about heating the home than you do about cooling it. Sure, there's probably a week or two in the year when you go, I want a really good aircon. Like, but the rest of the year, it's actually mainly heating. And so the perfect thing about a tiny home is the fact that it doesn't take much to heat it up. Like it's far easier to heat a place than it is to cool a place typically. And so, it really, I'll run the heater for maybe 15 minutes, like just a little split system up there. And you're cooking. And also because the bed is upstairs, heat rises. It's really not a problem at all.
Great.
So summer does become a bit of a problem. That thing is on 24/7. Just purely trying to, heat rises, the bed's upstairs, etc., etc. And that is one of the other reasons why I would do the single story thing. Like having the bed upstairs is nice until it's summer. Which it is, it's a sauna up there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I did know that, because that's actually one thing that architecture does tell you or teach you quite a bit, is that sort of like the thermals and environmental performance and all that sort of stuff. That's quite a big aspect of architecture. So I do have I've sort of got 3 windows on one side up on the top, and then 1 window on the other side of the bed as well. So you can open them all, get cross ventilation. And with the skylight as well, you can crack that open. And it ventilates really well up there. Especially, it can be quite nice when you're laying in. You've got both the windows and the breeze that's just going across the bed 24/7. It's quite good. But that's one very big consideration I would probably, sort of emphasize when designing a tiny home is think about how heat works.
Mm.
Like mainly heat as opposed to cool. I wouldn't be too worried about the cool, put it that way.
It's implied in what you were just saying that I understand, but it may not be clear to everybody, is that, so I'll just make it explicit, is that double glazing is designed to keep heat in. It's not designed to keep cool in.
Yeah.
Like typically the double glazing is an issue for large houses because it does take a lot to heat them. And so when we lose heat from an inside, heated environment when it's very cold outside, double glazing is there to slow that process down. But
Exactly.
So because tiny houses are so easy to heat, and as you said, 15 minutes with a split system and you're done, it doesn't tend to weigh out very well in the cost benefit analysis for a tiny house. The cost is not just the financial, but the weight cost. And what it's doing for you is not as much as it would do in a large conventionally sized house.
Exactly.
So just making that clear.
Yeah. So it's probably not so much that it traps the heat. Also, how to phrase this? So if you have obviously larger windows and etc., light can still get inside and heat up internally. Then if you have those double glazed, that's when it traps the heat quite well. So it's not so much that it traps heat though, it's more so that it traps whatever the temperature is inside, it'll keep that. So if you have these big windows that then allow lots of light to come in and sort of heat it up internally, typically the more thermal mass you've got inside, which this tiny home has nothing inside, there's no thermal mass here, but typically the more thermal mass that you have, the more that will impact that. Probably, I guess, so that's sort of a bit of a segment to tell people to have a bit of a read through passive house design, how that works, because that can really, really help for tiny homes. That's probably the one area that architecture does help you with quite a lot. I think sort of actually when I was designing a tiny home, I think one of my more primary concerns, which I probably shouldn't have been too concerned about in the end, was actually moisture. I know that there's a lot of people, probably more so like Queensland, for example, that they have a lot of moisture issues in their tiny home, because obviously when you're in here, if you breathe, you're breathing out moisture that in a larger house, it has more space to sort of dissipate. In a tiny home, there's a lot of times you'll wake up and like all your windows will be covered in moisture, like top to bottom, and you've got like a little sill just filled with water, if it's not designed correctly. Which is where I guess that's where double glazing can have its benefits.
Yep.
But like in this one, I'm sure if you can kind of see it, but so on that side of the aircon there's also a little mechanical heat recovery ventilation system.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so it essentially pushes and pulls. There's another one in the bathroom. So as one pushes air out, the other pulls air in. And I think from memory, it's like a 97% efficiency rate. So any heat or any air that pulls in from outside is then swapped through the heat or cool from the inside. So you don't really lose heat or cool, but at least it sort of gives like a constant, sort of.
It's an air exchange, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's like, so it's bringing in dry air from the outside. Yeah, like we talk about this a lot. Like it's not in the online course. So when you took it, you had the architecture, so that was helpful for you. But like what we teach in the weekend workshops now is really informed by the passive house understanding of and where passive house original designs went wrong, because they did so much air tightness that they had mold problems. And there's a lot to be considered in a tiny house design when you're thinking about just how much humidity is being managed within a small space, because every time you use the tap or a shower or breathe or cook soup, you are definitely increasing the humidity ratio, and it's just higher in a tiny house than it is in a larger house with just more air to sort of contain that, and the temperatures that can change that. So higher temperatures can hold more water in the air,
exactly.
and colder temperatures drop that water out of the air. So, we really think about how all the learnings from Passive House and how that can be applied. And also it comes with a bit of a warning, like don't just go full passive, because if you lock it in so tight without that sort of mechanical recovery system, it's going to be a mold bucket. You don't want mold inside your walls, and you don't want mold inside the house. And so there's like all these layers to manage.
Yeah.
But it sounds like, you've...
I think probably the main two would be, like cooking and the shower. Washing your hands and all that. Maybe like, I don't know, if you wash your dishes with like really hot, maybe that might be another thing. But it's honestly 90% of it will come from the shower, in my opinion. That's one thing that we sort of, when I first moved in, I was like, why are the windows always like, what's going on? And then I realized if I just shower with like, I can just crack a window open, that would eliminate, like, 'cause every single morning I would wake up and all the windows would be covered. And I'm like, how is this happening? I've designed it so well that, with all this like heat recovery, all this stuff. And I was like, I'm an architect. I should know how to fix this. I quite literally just realized, I needed to crack the shower. Just while I'm having the shower, I just cracked the top one. I've sort of just got like a louvered window in the bathroom. Just literally just have that little bit open, get some ventilation going, at 10-15 minutes, and then that's it. That's all it took.
So you weren't off. It's that far. Like it's a small correction and a manageable one, but you need to know how it works in order to fix it.
Yeah, exactly. And so one thing that I actually found is that, so when I shifted it to an Airbnb, is most guests won't care about that. They don't care about your house. Like, they're respectfully, they're going to treat it like shit. And so I had to figure out a way around that. I was like, how do I get them to crack this window open? And I realized I couldn't do that. But what you can do is get the extractor fans in the bathroom that run on a humidity sensor. And so the second they turn the shower on, I've actually got it default, so they cannot override it at all. If there's moisture in the bathroom, so be it. It's running full blast until there's no more moisture. And so I put up a sign saying, FYI, because it's right underneath the bed, obviously, as well. So, some people, I found when I first put it in there, they would like manually override it and switch it off so that way they could go to sleep and whatnot. So I just put a sign next to it saying, this will run until it's dry, crack the windows if you want to speed this up. And I've never had a problem since.
Great.
Not once at all. So that's probably, I found that's probably actually the best way to do it, because I don't know about other people, but I hate having a fan on in the bathroom. But if I forced it to be on and I didn't have the choice to turn it on, then I was like, fine, I'll have the fan. Like, I was doing it to myself, and I was like, that's cool. I sort of like it to have like a nice little humid bucket in there. Just kind of, that's a bit weird like that, but
I know what you mean. I know. I don't like to. It's not very relaxing to have a bath or a shower if the fan is just buzz, let alone try to sleep. But you do have to take care of your house. So.
Exactly. So, but if you crack the window, 5 minutes, the fan turns off and you're good again. So it was just a habit that I had to instill in both myself and, now the Airbnb guests. But it's sort of like small compromises like that you're going to make when you move into a tiny home. I mean, that wasn't a very big compromise at all. To be honest, it's more the actual size of the place is probably the biggest compromise. Obviously.
Yeah. How did it feel like living in it? Did it? Did you feel like you had to change your lifestyle, or were there areas that you thought, this is really working, or this really isn't?
I was already trying to really go into like minimalism at the time. So I was already actively cutting down my closet like more and more and more and more. To this day, I've still, all I wear is a black t-shirt. Like that's, as a dude, that's probably quite okay. I just wear black shorts, black shirt. I love it. I don't have to think about what I wear anymore. It's not a decision I ever really liked making as well. So I guess in that regard, I was already scaling back well and truly prior to, because I actually was thinking of the van conversion initially. And van conversion's even more hardcore than, living in a van is more hardcore than being in a tiny home. So for me, it wasn't that bad, to be completely honest. Like, but my entire life fits in 2 drawers. At that time, it was quite literally just like a similar drawer to just this one here. Just, I don't know, a 600 mil drawer, and that was it. Actually, no, sorry, it was 3 drawers. Um, my girlfriend at the time, she struggled quite a bit more with clothing. Um, understandably, I gave her a bit more closet space and etc. in a tiny home, but there's only so many things that you can cut. Like it was kind of forced up, not forced upon her, but I was like, well, if you want to move into the tiny home with me, then these are the sacrifices we have to make. Um,
Mm.
which we were quite fortunate as well that we did like the place that we were staying at. They did have a big shed that we could just store our like random bits and bobs in. So like
Mm.
surfboards and etc. Like so all the outdoor equipment or just long-term stuff that we didn't really need to access was just all in that shed. Um, so I guess I never really just lived in the tiny home, I guess, like per se, but I don't know. I feel like you find ways around it all. Whether you have
Yeah.
like a little sort of Bunnings, $1,000 shed that you just pop next to your thing, and you've just got all your, if it's summer, you put your winter stuff there. If it's winter, you put your summer stuff there. Um, but it's actually I find it really quite nice to live with less. I do it a bit less now that I'm not in a tiny home. I'm quite
Mm.
a bit guilty of that, but it's nice, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like it suited you probably a bit better than your girlfriend. But, like it's
Yeah,
nice to have that internal motivation, isn't it? To say, like, I want to do this because of minimalism, not
exactly.
just I have to do this because now I'm living in a tiny house. So it's
Yeah.
just it's a bit of a mindset
Yeah.
thing.
I think for me more so it was because I was studying, well, I was sort of like researching like buying houses and etc. Um, and for most people nowadays, it's because like it seems so unobtainable. Like it just seems so ridiculously hard to get into it.
Mm.
And so the tiny home, I was like, well, look, like realistically, one day I do want to have an actual home. Like that's the
Mm.
goal. Um, the tiny home was initially sort of meant to be like stepping stones. I put it somewhere, live super, frugally, um, save up hard essentially, um, and then move out or so buy a place. Um, as which it's done perfectly well. It's had it's done well. It's probably something that I don't think many people would live in their whole life, I would say. Um,
Mm.
like after a while, you do get you go, okay, this is nice and all, but probably a little bit more space would be all right. Um, but comparatively, look, I have some friends that live in apartments that are probably the same size as this tiny home. And
Mm.
they're paying upwards of, $400-500 a week. Um, and then you compare that to like a tiny home where I know some people can rent for free. Some people, I think average is like around $200 a week for a tiny home.
Mm.
I think you probably actually be far more informed about that stuff than I would be.
Oh,
Um,
it varies a lot. Yeah, depending
yeah,
on like proximity to services and
yeah,
what the person can bring in terms of their own power, water, or like
exactly.
it really, really varies. Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess irregardless, though, it's going to be far cheaper than have like paying for rent. Um,
Yes.
that gets a night and day difference.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Ultimately, there are definitely sacrifices you have to make with a tiny home. So you know, it's you're not living in a mansion. Like you take what you get.
Yeah.
But it's quite it teaches you a lot of lessons in terms of what is actually valuable, what is not, what do you need in your tiny home, what don't you need, what you end up like realizing I had so much more shit than I thought that I didn't need. I was like I don't need that. Like why do I have this book from 10 years ago that I was like, oh, and then yeah. It
Yeah.
makes it a lot easier to rationalize cutting down on things. Whereas if you've got a big house with an extra, a spare bedroom, you go, oh, we'll just shove it in there. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, I don't know. I think there's definitely a lot of good lessons that come out of having a tiny home.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good thing to do. It's sort of like a nice um it's nice to have a patch of your life where you do it,
Yeah,
because it does change the way that you think about the rest of, you know,
yeah,
it's definitely impacted the way I think about stuff,
yeah.
the stuff of life. But it was really hard to live in here with a kid, and
Oh
in fact,
yeah,
I broke up with this tiny house and we don't live in it anymore, which I hope everybody knows. But yeah, like we broke up with the tiny house when I was pregnant with the second child, because it's
Mm.
really hard doing ladders with
Yeah.
pregnancy. But I could just already see that it was going to expire. Like ours is 5.4 meters long, so really,
Yeah.
really
Okay.
short. It's probably the smallest tiny house that most people will see.
Yeah.
Because it not being caravan version of a tiny house, it's by which I mean it's not designed to look like a tiny house and tour.
Yeah.
It's designed as a stay in one spot. It meets the caravan registration requirements, but it's still heavy, too
Yeah.
heavy to tow regularly or frequently.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's a very small, tiny house, and I just found that with the amount
Yeah.
of stuff that comes with kids, the
Mm.
nappies, the clothing, the toys,
Smells probably.
you name it, the slings,
Yeah.
everything. Like we did it for a year, and I just
Yeah.
thought I can't do this with two.
Mm.
Yeah, so that was a moment where I was just like, it was really good to do, and like it was great having all the built-in furniture. We actually didn't have much furniture, so it didn't matter to me
Yeah.
that we didn't have a couch and a
Yeah.
TV. I mean, we don't live with a TV anyway, but like, just stuff that you just don't need anymore. It's all built in and it's integrated and everything's got a spot. And
Yeah. I think
yeah.
probably the hardest part. I mean, if you live by yourself, it's very, very easy. I think the problem is like, when you're in people's spaces 24/7, having the ability to sort of have a physical barrier to, say, I don't know, say for whatever reason you're in a bad mood, someone else is in a bad mood, you just need physical separation. I think that's probably the hardest thing in a tiny home of like, how do you define, like, what are you going to do during that situation? If someone, I don't know, say someone's angry or something like that, and someone else is not angry at each other, but whatever. Like, how do you resolve that in such a small space? And I think that's probably one thing that I struggle with the most living in a tiny home is like being so close to someone 24/7. You go, there's only one spot you can relax, which was on the couch. It's like if you just want like a bit of physical space, it's kind of impossible to do that in a tiny home. So I think that for me was probably like the hardest thing to probably live with, I guess.
Relationally. I just definitely found
Yeah.
living with Fred, like we had to solve things immediately.
Instantly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is
like
good and
you just-
bad. Yeah.
yeah, we got better at it, You
Yeah.
kind of go, okay, I can't get any physical space from you. I could feel the energy just pounding off you.
Yeah.
It's
Exactly.
like, can we just fix this now? So I don't have to
Exactly.
wait for 2 hours until you've come down.
Exactly. So it's pros and cons. It's stuff like that. Like even like, I don't know, if someone farts in a tiny home, like it's not going anywhere. It's right.
No.
Like
You live
smells.
in it.
Yeah, smells, go everywhere in here. That being said, it's nowhere near as bad as I actually thought when I was like originally watching all the tiny home interviews. They're like, "Oh, smells are horrible." It's like, well, if you keep the place clean, it's not going to smell that bad. It's not going to smell bad at all. Actually, period. This tiny home smells 1,000 times nicer than anywhere else I go. I guess with it being a tiny home, it gets smaller space, gets dirtier a lot quicker, so you're doing a lot more cleaning, but it takes a lot less time to clean it. So it's pros and cons of it all. Like I could go and deep clean the house in 30 minutes, and like you can't go deep clean your normal house in 30 minutes. Like
No,
I'm talking
you can't.
every drawer, under every bed, under everything in 30 minutes, and then it's like I can't even do my bedroom at home in 30 minutes.
No, I'll bet.
Yeah.
Hey, tell me about your services. Did you get off grid, or it sounds like if you're running your air conditioning 24/7
Yeah.
in summertime, you're able to access mains power.
Yeah. So originally the intention was to run it all off grid. Because I actually worked for a like passive house solar company when I was building a tiny home.
Wow.
So I sat there and did the maths, like crunching the numbers, like financially and etc. And it didn't really add up to go fully off grid. At least not at that point. Because it was sort of like an extra, I don't know, $50 a week or something to get someone's power. And I was like, okay, $50 a week versus the size of system that I would have needed. I have no idea. Let's say $30,000 or something, 20,000. like the amount of weeks it would have taken to pay itself off. I was like, that's one thing I can probably sort of wait on. I was like, I'll live in it for a bit. See, I have actually all the connections up to the roof right now, for
Yep.
solar. Like I quite literally have a bag of solar cable just like drooped on the roof. Um, it's like the earth is run up there, the mains, etc. But if I were to have, been somewhere a bit more remote, that it wasn't, it would have been more of a nuisance, then yes, I probably definitely would have gone down the solar route. But yeah, it just didn't really, because like, I mean, everything in the tiny home is electric apart from the hot water system. So, but yeah, so I would definitely still think about doing solar at some point. But I mean, every spot that I've been to has, we've got a mains connection point 10 meters away. So it didn't really make sense. That said, the entire tiny home does run off a 10 amp socket as opposed to a 15 amp socket. So you just have to be sort of somewhat mindful of like, you can't run the stove, the microwave, and the aircon at the same time. Or else, or else it will automatically, I've got like a little sort of safety trip system. But it is just sort of an extra thing to be cautious of. I've only sort of had one person that's ever done it. I think I've done it once. Actually, I did it on purpose to see if it would trip the system.
Yeah, I just feel like you probably had, in a way, like a little bit of a disadvantage of having had the conventional building training, and then applied it to the tiny house in different ways. I feel like that's a trap that lots of people with a construction training fall into, because if you're coming at it fresh from a DIY project kind of perspective and you haven't built heaps of houses before and you don't have that, bigger is better. It has to be strong. It has to bear lots of weight. So we're going to have to put in the biggest members. We have to put big lintels. We have to put big, very frequent spacings and all this stuff. Anything that you try and do to make it match the residential building code is going to make it probably too heavy to be a vehicle. So correct, I just wanted to say that, unfortunately, in a way, your training on it was a little bit of a disadvantage. Like if you didn't have all that and you just went, what does Fred say? And, I know it sounds like I'm spruiking my own thing, but I really see the difference. Like at 7.2, you shouldn't be up against the weight limit. One loft, 7.2, not even off grid. Like like I've got people who've done it with 600 kilos to spare off grid with 2 lofts. Same, same everything. So it's the way in which you moved towards the NCC, the National Construction Code for Residential Buildings, and where you left behind the unified construction method that Fred teaches. Those were the moments where you accidentally added heaps of unnecessary weight. So I reckon you could totally go for like a 9 meter long, 1-story, slightly lower roof, stretching that weight out and doing the unified construction method. You actually will be able to stretch that 4.5 ton that far.
Oh yeah, I mean, because I do sort of have, my brain is toying with the idea of another tiny home. But yeah, and if I did that, that is pretty much exactly what I would do. Like a 9 meter one, single story. I mean, sure, I love timber, but maybe I'll just do one face of the building that is timber clad. And the rest of it is, I don't know, color bond or something like that. So it's sacrifices like that I wasn't really willing to make that I wish I made now.
You could do the timber cladding, just do cedar cladding. Like there's
but silvertop ash looks nice though.
It does look really nice. It does. But you could, like, if you didn't have 2 layers of 12 mil ply in addition, like, who knows? Like you could do a lot better in terms of, making the weight that, if you really want to prioritize that thing that you want to see on the external, then do prioritize it, but don't also go, National Construction Code for this and this and this and this and this. It's just
exactly
not appropriate for a vehicle and not necessary. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's all right. You live and you learn.
You live and you learn. That's all right. It's all right. It's good that you can maybe do another one, because then we can You know, you can refine it and see how big you can go. So you've shared so much about like what your processes been with building and what you do differently, and you know, the obstacles that you faced and what it was like to live in, and the evolution of the tiny house that you've built.
Mm.
So I just wanted to ask, you know, is there any sort of final reflections that you'd have that you'd want people to hear?
Um, yeah, I'd probably say listen to like Fred, like to be completely honest. Like I it was probably just me being a young, naive, 20-year-old. Um no disrespect to Fred, but I thought I'm from construction. I understand, yes, Fred's right, etc. I kind of there was definitely something like a lot of hurdles that I could have overcome if I just listened to Fred. I didn't listen to Fred. Fred told me, I told him, like, no, I'm not listening to you, Fred. I know, I took it on. I took it on and I thought about it. I sat there, I compared things I told Fred that I was going to do, what's it called? The tongue and groove, like flooring stuff, the 21 mil, what's it called again? Anyway, that's super heavyweight stuff. The yellow tongue, that's it, Jesus.
Oh yeah.
I was like, I'm going to do yellow tongue flooring. And Fred's just like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm doing yellow tongue. He's like, Lars, the weight. And I was like, I don't care. I want it to be stable. He was like, fine, Lars, do it. And so I did it. Once again, probably wouldn't have done. But because I'd seen some people, like when I was doing all the research and whatnot, because I probably spent, I think for every 1 hour of construction that I did, I probably spent 3 hours or 4 hours of research, which is one thing that I think a lot of people probably didn't really understand. They're like, oh, why is it taking so long? Well, I wanted to do it what I thought was right. Like I researched so much. It was like too much probably. Yeah, so I would probably in doing so I sort of over engineered things more than they should, but I was more so fearful because I'm not going to point out her name, but there was one YouTuber that was building a tiny home, and I was looking at the structure that she's building, and she'd done pretty much everything in construction that you would is like a legal requirement. Had not done it at all, to the point where by the time she'd framed the whole building up and etc. and the headers that sort of went above her window, for example, she'd sort of just nailed them in from the outside, didn't have any supports under the the lintels of the windows. By the time she put the windows in, it had drooped, like the weight had pushed the window down to the point where she couldn't open the windows anymore. And so I was kind of pessimistic in that aspect of like, I would watch every single video where things went wrong and I would try and see, okay, what did they do wrong? Why did they do it? So that's why I took on that very sort of over-engineer it approach. I also knew that 7.2, I wasn't really going to go overweight. I got close to it, but I didn't. But yeah, so I'd probably say, yeah, listen to Fred. Yeah, obviously challenge him. I had quite a few phone calls with Fred during the build, but it was like, that was, I think, one of the nicest things I think about sort of buying a tiny home from you guys, for example, versus someone else. That's like, I remember I was challenging you right when I was buying the tiny home. I know you remember that one very vividly.
Yeah, I pulled over. I was like, geez, are you giving me a hard time about the person?
For everyone listening, yeah, for everyone listening, I actually went out to 20 something companies. It was actually well over 20, but I came back with, I think, 12 to 15 quotes for tiny homes, and I analyzed every single one of them. I put them into a spreadsheet. I was like, pros and cons of each. Like every single column was like, does this one come with like the corner jack things, or this things, that things? What the extra pros and cons. And I remember calling you up at one point. I was like, you guys are a few $1,000s more. Why should I go with you? I already had my answer in the back of my mind that I was going with you. I was trying to challenge you guys a little bit. But I think ultimately Fred's involvement in the tiny home industry was the one thing that I think sold me the most. The fact that I could just pick up a phone call. I mean, I only did it probably like 5 times or something like that in the entire build. But those 5 times were they were worth it. That's why that was the main reason I think why I actually went you guys. The trust that I had with Fred and his experience being in the tiny homes. That was my biggest thing, I would say. It was, there's all these other tiny home manufacturers. I'm not trying to say they're bad or anything, but they're not as involved in the whole tiny home movement as you guys were. I mean, like you guys have literally lived in one. I don't personally know of another tiny home trailer manufacturer that lives in a tiny home. So, but yeah, so I'll probably wrap it up with that, I would say.
Yeah, that's pretty good advice, isn't it? I was going to say, like, it's totally understandable that it would take 3 hours of research to 1 hour of building, because, like, when I noticed when Fred was building this tiny house and he didn't have all that sort of construction knowledge, it really was like getting 7 different apprenticeships, sorry, in one build. Like, he had to learn carpentry and he had to learn welding and he had to learn, all, like, I don't know, all the different things, including design. So it was really like how to pick it apart. So yeah, I know that it does take that, and it's good that you were thinking critically about like what could go wrong and how to apply it. And then I also think, and Fred spends his whole life thinking what could go wrong, and that's why he teaches what he teaches. So in a sense, you could have made your life easier, as you say, like, just by going like, well, Fred actually just thinks about this all the time. I'll just ask him what he thinks. It's sort of done. So
no, it's definitely changed the whole trajectory of like my life, I would say. Like my tiny home then became like, being in architecture and design, my tiny home was my portfolio. So like I would literally rock up to people and they'd be like, oh, they're like, oh, so what have you, because like when you apply for an architecture job, you sort of have to show what you've done, what you've designed. But being a student, everything is non-tangible. Like nothing that you've designed is physically there. And so, not that it's very architecturally like creative, like not creative, but as in like it's not some masterpiece sort of thing. But it's
not a building that is a croissant, for example. Like
exactly, yes, like yeah. But it's something so weirdly unique still that every I would just rock up and just show them my tiny home. They're like, oh, what can you do? I'm like, oh, well, I have real world experience building. I understand like it, and so I think like so also from like an architecture point of view, a lot of architects get criticized for not sort of understanding. I don't put this. So they don't understand how things are actually physically built, to put it simply. It's a bit of a running joke that architects will, design it to be all fluffy, and then you've got like, plumbing going through beams and like electrical going through your plumbing pipes, and it's just like, because that's the architect just goes, oh, just on a diagram it works, but that's very different than real life. So the tiny home was very, very helpful in that. And sort of, it has definitely changed. Like I don't know, just 6-7 years ago from now, I definitely didn't think that this is where I'd be sitting in a tiny home. Like, it's literally changed my jobs. It's changed my career. It's changed everything. So, for the better. But yeah.
Yeah, it's terrific. Yeah, you really have cut your teeth and, as you said, like launched your career and changed your trajectory and hopefully gotten a few steps closer towards conventional home ownership, if that's still your goal.
Most certainly, yes. It's it's definitely within arm's reach now as well. So it's
that's great.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, sure. It's a bit unfortunate that I sort of had to move out of the tiny home because of like work, traveling, etc. Because I'm sort of interstate so often. But yeah, no, it's still, there's definitely no regrets with what I've done. I think that was, sorry to sort of keep rambling on here a little bit, but that was also one of the main things of why I chose the tiny home versus like the van build. Is it's something, sure, a van build is, you've got a nice van after, but at the tiny home, I was like, worst case scenario. Well, I think I had like 3 options. Worst case scenario was 1, I hate it, I sell it, I'll make money. Probably, maybe. Even if I don't, I'm even or something. Option 2 is, I live in it. It's cool. I don't want to live in it full time. I go put it in a block of land in the middle of nowhere, and I have a holiday house or something. Like because you can buy a very cheap block of land and etc. And option 3 was, I love it, I live in it. I'll live in it. Oh, one I didn't really think about it was option 4. I can't live in it. I Airbnb it, and then I still stay in here, once every fortnight or something like that, just when I can, because it's so beautiful just being out in nature and etc. I think that's one thing that I sort of accidentally took for granted when I was living in a tiny home, is I was always just I was in the middle of a cow paddock, like it was amazing. You're out with nature the whole time, and I thought, oh, this is cool. And then I moved to the city again, and I realized, like, I really, really enjoyed just being out there. You could just, have all the windows and doors open. There's not a sound in the world except maybe a cow that's like mooing off in the distance or something. But yeah, so it's definitely a very nice lifestyle, I would say.
Yeah, it's very relaxing, isn't it? Just so close to nature.
Yeah, indeed. But yeah.
Well done, Lars. You've made a beautiful house and you've put so much into it, and I think it's paying dividends. And I think I hope you're really proud of it, because it's something to be really proud of.
Yes, no, it is. It is my little baby. I don't regret a single thing. Like, I don't think anyone should be afraid of taking the leap and doing it. It is definitely a big, it's not a small decision to make. I wouldn't say just go for it, but as in, think about it and do it.
If you're interested in building or buying a tiny house on wheels, I highly recommend taking our online course, which is called How to Build a Tiny House, the Australian online course, and you can find it at tinyhouseuniversity.com.au. Hundreds of people have used it to build a successful tiny house on wheels, and you can too. We also offer weekend workshops throughout the year where you get to sit for a whole weekend in a classroom environment and thrash out the problems of tiny house building. You'll be taught all of the basics, plus a whole bunch of new material about vapor permeable membranes and everything that we've learned from passive house experiences for tiny house living to get the best thermal performance and humidity management in your tiny house. And you'll also get the benefit of hearing other people ask their questions and all of the discussion that really helps people thrash out their thoughts about their tiny house building project. With the weekend workshop, you also get the online course for free. So that's a really awesome set of ongoing notes that you can use throughout the period of time that you're building your house. So pop over to fredstinyhouses.com.au/education to find out more about those education offerings. You can follow Fred's Tiny Houses on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Pinterest. You can also reach out to us and just write to info@fredstinyhouses.com.au, and that email comes to me and I'll write back. If you're ready to buy a Fred's Tiny House trailer, then pop over to our website, fredstinyhouses.com.au/shop, and peruse through our wide range of tiny house trailers. We only build tiny house trailers. We don't build any type of other trailer. We specifically design all of our trailers with your house in mind. So everything that you need to think about for a tiny house build is considered inside a tiny house trailer design from Fred's Tiny Houses. So check that out at fredstinyhouses.com.au/shop. Please share these episodes with people that you know and love who are interested in tiny house builds. The more people who know about it, the better. Give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts and on YouTube and on Google and on Facebook and all the places. We love 5-star reviews. You'll see heaps of people have already done it, and we're really welcoming more because we want more and more people to build successful tiny house builds across Australia. Thanks heaps. That's it for season 3. I hope you enjoyed all of those conversations and learnt heaps about it. If you need anything tiny house related, hit us up at Fred's Tiny Houses. We're here to help. If you've been listening to the podcast and you'd also like to see the tiny houses that we're talking about, you can actually watch the interviews on YouTube, where we get to see all of the pictures of their tiny house, their outcome, as well as the build. And it really helps to illustrate the conversation that we're having. So feel free to pop over to YouTube, and you can subscribe by looking up Fred's Tiny Houses and checking out the playlist of Candid Tiny House.